just around the corner. Democrats are going into the new year feeling hopeful, sensing a good chance to take back the House of Representatives, in part because of President Trump's approval ratings, which are not particularly high. Plus, history shows the party that holds the White House usually gets hit hard in the midterms in Congress. But President Trump is hopeful as well, as he looks for more bipartisan support in the coming year. Joining us now, David Hawkins, senior editor at Roll Call. So which side is going to blink here, David? The Democrats feel they have a pretty good chance to take back the House. The president thinks he has a pretty good chance to go bipartisan and get some things done.
You know, I think both things could still be true. I think my assessment is that and my understanding from the people I've talked to is that the Democrats are going to wait to see what the Republicans do. That really what and so I think that this piece you just had on sort of leads right into this strategy session in the new year. For start, the Republicans have plenty of things about which they disagree strategically. Nothing unifies them like tax cuts. They did pull that off with an amazing degree of unity and speed. But whether Mr. Trump and the Republican leaders can translate that into some agreement amongst themselves on what to do and how to do it, is a big question. So my sense is that the Democrats on infrastructure and other things are going to wait to see how the Republicans, whether they get together, and then the Democrats would come in and say, all right, we're going to be willing to work with a united united Republican front, try and get some leverage to shape deals the way we want. And if the Republicans aren't together, then the Democrats can hang back and point to the Republicans and say, look, they can't govern. They're too conservative. We'd be willing to work with them if they got their act together. But unless they get their unity, we're not going to go along. Yeah,
but despite the numbers that they hold, the Democrats have had very little leverage. I mean, especially in the Senate, where you're going to be looking at a 51-49 split. The Republicans were still able to manage to get this tax reform bill through as a reconciliation measure, which allowed them to do it on pretty much a straight party line vote.
That's exactly true. Infrastructure will not be able to be debated under those rules, without getting too far down in the weeds. Reconciliation is only for the idea is only for sort of pure budget bills, to oversimplify just a little bit. So they were able to do their effort on health care and turn that into a budget bill. They were able to do it and it didn't work, of course. They were able to do it on taxes. They're not going to be able to do it on infrastructure. So there will be, in the Senate, they'll need 60 votes. That means if all the Republicans hang together, that's 51. They'd need to get at least 9 of the Democrats to join with them on an infrastructure bill. That gives the Democrats much more leverage in the new year than they had on the big ticket items, health care and taxes, in the year just ending.
So the president tweeted the other day or I think he said it in a speech, that infrastructure, it would have been easy for him to start his administration with some kind of an infrastructure bill because both parties are generally in favor of it. Do you see Democrats getting on board?
I think they would like to get on board. I think in general, it's true that, Democrats are more about priming the economic pump with federal spending. Public works spending primes the pump. It creates jobs. It puts people, puts people to work. It puts them out on the roads and building tunnels and highways.
Unless you're Barack Obama and you find out that there weren't as many shovel-ready projects as he thought there were.
That is true. That is definitely true. So I think the big question is, and you alluded to, and Rich alluded to it in his piece, are there going to be Republicans, having just cut taxes and added $1 trillion to deficits in the next decade? How many Republicans, how many people who portray themselves as budget hawks, as fiscal hawks, are going to be willing to go along with something? The president talks about $1 trillion. In fact, we think that what we're getting out of the White House is not $1 trillion in federal spending, but maybe a quarter of that in federal spending that he hopes will leverage public works spending by private concerns. Will enough Republicans be willing to go along with that? I don't think we know, and I think we will know, however, once we see whether they keep the government open at the end of January, whether the Republicans get together on that, on increasing spending levels that will allow that to happen, whether they get together on an immigration fix that the Democrats are going to have leverage on. So we'll know by the end of January, I think, whether this infrastructure thing has a bipartisan chance.
This president has broken a lot of the presidential molds, and we'll see whether that holds when it comes to the electoral results come November. David Hawkins from Roll Call. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
frigid winter blast causing major problems in dozens of states. In Missouri, it was one of just hundreds. It was just one of hundreds of accidents over the past few days. A person getting into a tow truck was hit and killed by a driver who lost control there. But maybe the worst weather was in Erie, Pennsylvania. Nearly 5 feet of snow falling in just 2 days, shattering records for the area. Meteorologist Adam Klotz is in the Weather Center. So, Adam, what can we expect as we get closer to the new year?
Well, maybe not a lot more snow, but the big story is going to be these frigid temperatures. We've been seeing them all morning. We're going to be continuing to see them. We have all these wind chill advisories stretching from the middle of the country all the way back to Maine. The wind has been there. The temperatures have been absolutely frigid. Take a look at some of these numbers. These are your current wind chills. There are spots where it feels like as low as -30. That's running you up into Fargo. But even in Chicago, -12 is the current feels like temperature, -4 in Cleveland, -8 in Kansas City. Spots where it's typically warmer, also feeling cold. Feels like 26 degrees for folks in Dallas right now. I can take you into a spot where some of that coldest air continues to linger, and we're looking at now, these are current temperatures, no longer wind chill, spots hanging down around 0 or 1 degrees, and still plenty of areas in those negative numbers as well. Still feeling, or still is -24 degrees in International Falls. You get right up there along the Canadian line, and that's where that cold air is settling in from. Before it's all said and done, the temperatures will eventually be topping off around 11 in Chicago, 6 in Minneapolis, 17 degrees in Kansas City. All of this cold air is going to continue to settle into the country and actually move a little bit farther off to the east. So if you're beginning to think of your plans heading towards the holiday, New Year's Eve and then New Year's Day, well, here you go. These are your lows. So Friday morning lows, still cold. Saturday morning lows, you see a secondary round of cold air settling in. It really spreads across for Sunday morning. Again, Sunday night, that's New Year's Eve. New Year's Day, you're heading out that night. These are the type of temperatures the whole country is going to be dealing with. You're looking at a lot of spots there into the teens, as far south as Little Rock, getting down into 1, 2, 3 degrees in Chicago. It is going to be frigid for folks out there partying and celebrating the new year, guys.
All right, I like that 74-degree high over in LA. I think we're on the wrong side of the country
Let's
here.
go.
Adam Klotz, thank you.
New U.S. sanctions to tell you about in the North Korea crisis, who the Treasury Department is targeting, and their connection to Kim Jong-un's ballistic missile program. Plus, the latest on a fast-moving fire that forced dozens of people out of their homes on Christmas Eve, what investigators have learned.
You hope it's going to be a quiet Christmas, but these things happen, and you just get on through. We were waiting to see if the whole building was going to go up.
Did have to rescue one woman who was dangling from a third-floor window. Well, the fire department says that arson dogs detected an accelerant at the scene, but so far, no suspects.
Right now, new sanctions against North Korea, with the Treasury Department going after 2 people it describes as, quote, key leaders of Kim Jong-un's ballistic missile program. This comes as Russia once again offers to act as mediator between the U.S. and North Korea. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott is following all of the developments live from our London bureau. So what do we know about these new sanctions, Greg?
John, yeah, there are new moves against the upper echelon of the North Korean government. The 2 figures that were fingered by the U.S. Treasury Department with these new sanctions are thought to be 2 of the top 3 individuals close to Kim Jong-un, close to the missile program. They were moved against by the U.S., and it came just 4 days after UN Security Council sanctions as well against North Korea. North Korea, in the past couple of days, the government branding those sanctions an act of war. All of this comes, John, amid talk from a South Korean government agency that North Korea might negotiate with the United States in 2018, this about its missile and its nuclear programs. Kremlin even getting involved, saying that they would offer to mediate those talks. That said, there really are no indications on either side that there could be any talks in the offing. In fact, the talk we have heard, John, in the past couple of days is that North Korea might be getting ready to launch a satellite into space. Even this is seen as a cover for its long-range missile testing program.
But there are also new concerns, are there not, about biological and chemical weapons there?
There are certainly indeed, John, just in the past 24 hours, new reports that have got people concerned. Doctors have investigated, have detected in the body of a North Korean soldier who defected to the South recently anthrax antibodies. Now, that could indicate that the soldier was vaccinated against this deadly biological weapon. It could mean he's been handling it or involved in some kind of storehouse. And there are concerns that North Korea does have stockloads of both biological and chemical weapons. Just this past year, I think our viewers will remember that it was believed that North Korea was behind the death of the estranged brother of Kim Jong-un in Malaysia using a VX agent. So there are continuing to be concerns all around, John, going into the new year. Back to you.
The video we just showed from the airport of that attack on his brother, pretty chilling stuff. Greg Palcott, our chief foreign affairs correspondent. Greg, thank you.
And for more on the new developments in the North Korea crisis, let's bring in Mike Baker, former CIA covert operations officer and president of Diligence LLC, a global intelligence and security firm. Nice to see you, Mike.
Thank you. Happy holidays, Leah.
Happy holidays to you. So let's talk about these two individuals who are being sanctioned, a rocket scientist, Kim Jong-sik, and a former senior Air Force commander named Ri Pyong-chol. So these are two people who are tight with Kim Jong-un. What do these sanctions really mean? Is there an impact? I mean, they're both very close with Kim Jong-un.
Right, they are. And we, in the intel community here in the U.S. and our allies, we spend a lot of time, obviously, studying and analyzing and trying to understand that inner circle around Kim. And these individuals, I mean, look, from an optic, it's important, you know, from the perception and from the message that we send to North Korea, and importantly, the message we send to Russia and China is that we are serious in our aggressiveness on these sanctions. But from a practical perspective, does it really mean much, you know, as far as Kim and Ri? And, you know, it doesn't really. It's not going to impact their daily lives. It's not going to affect their performance or their abilities in terms of assisting the North Korean missile program. But again, the messaging is important, and it's really equal parts to the Russians and the Chinese and to the North Koreans.
Well, if the messaging is important, do you think that we'll see more of these sanctions against individuals in North Korea?
Well, I hope so. We have to essentially, you know, I don't want to make this sound too undiplomatic, but we have to keep our boot on their neck. I mean, we can't ease off at this point. There are indications, certainly from China, that we're getting a shift in their mindset, that we're seeing some willingness on the Chinese authorities' part to actually enforce these sanctions. Look, the Russians and the Chinese have spent years and years and years circumventing sanctions. And, you know, the Russians in particular have been fairly successful talking out of both sides of their mouth. On one side, they decry and complain and condemn the nuclear tests and the ballistic missile tests from North Korea. But on the other side, they're busy, you know, busting the sanctions and softening them up every chance they get. So, you know, this is important, and we need to continue this effort. We also have to be pragmatic and understand that, you know, if we ease up as we have over the years, when we give them something, then we take something back, or they're not heartfelt sanctions, or we allow Russia and China to circumvent them, you know, they're going to reach their end game. They're going to have a fully developed weapons
and we've seen them continue to develop their capabilities. But I want to talk about Russia because Reuters is reporting that Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, has offered to help us talk to North Korea about this issue to, quote unquote, ease tensions. But look, you and I both know Russia only acts in its own self-interest. Do you see any reason at all to get Russia involved?
Yeah, it's so generous of them, isn't it? Maybe it has something to do with Christmas time, and they're just feeling magnanimous. But look, you know, the Russians have had a long history in North Korea. They helped establish North Korea, essentially, and they play an important role. We tend to always talk about China, but look, Russia, you know, they play a role. It's not to the same degree from the economic perspective, but Russia and China are the only two countries that provide, as an example, transportation or telecoms links, you know, for North Korea. And so, you know, do I think that they're sincere in their desire to denuclearize a peninsula? Absolutely not. As you pointed out, Russia is a classic example, along with China, of a nation acting in its own best interest. So Russia is doing this And they've done it in the past where they offer to step in and assist for their own reasons.
Yeah, it's always for their own good. It's always for their own good.
It's only for their own good.
And you know, Mike, before you go, I should also just point out that, you know, China does look like it's enforcing sanctions, but that's also according to China's own customs data. So we'll see about that.
Right.
Mike Baker, thank you.
No, that's a very good point, Leah. Yeah, happy holidays.
To you. John?
Prices at the pump could be on the rise. We'll tell you what's behind a spike in oil prices coming up. Plus 3 U.S. cities suing the Pentagon for repeatedly failing to report military convictions to the FBI. The major changes those cities are demanding now, next.
This is not a cloud. This is a tomato tracked from farm to table on a blockchain, helping keep shoppers.
Griff Jenkins live in Washington with details. So what's this lawsuit all about, Griff?
John, this is New York, Philadelphia, and San Francisco suing the military for failing to report in significant number of instances the criminal history of service members to the National Criminal Background Check System run by the FBI, allowing them to purchase and possess firearms when they should have been disqualified. The suit centers on the case of the Sutherland Springs, Texas shooting last November when Airman Devin Kelly was able to get a gun and kill 26 parishioners after the Air Force failed to report his 2012 conviction in court-martial for domestic violence. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio saying in a statement, this failure on behalf of the Department of Defense has led to the loss of innocent lives by putting guns in the hands of criminals and those who wish to cause immeasurable harm. This comes as the Pentagon's Inspector General John released a report this month that says across all the branches of the military, they essentially failed to meet their legal obligations to report this, and more than 30% of the time. Last year, the Air Force, 14%.
But they're also asking for judicial oversight of the Pentagon. Is that going to fly, Griff?
I'm not sure, and that's certainly an interesting part of the case. They're asking for an unprecedented court monitoring of the Pentagon's compliance with reporting this criminal history to the national system. In the suit, they write, quote, this suit therefore seeks judicial intervention, i.e. intervention by an independent and apolitical branch of government fully familiar with monitoring and maintaining compliance with the law. So this has never been done where they've asked the court to monitor the Pentagon's compliance. The Air Force has already been on record before this case saying they're asking leaders to acknowledge compliance with reporting this military history, but nothing new on it. And we actually reached out to the Pentagon, John. They have not responded to requests for reaction to this lawsuit specifically, but referred us to a prior statement saying that they're doing everything to ensure qualifying criminal history information is submitted to the FBI.
Let's hope we don't see another one of those events like Texas. Thanks very much. Griff Jenkins from Washington.
Just in on happening now, oil prices spiking after the Christmas holiday, surging some 2.5% to more than $60 a barrel. So the hike tied to a pipeline explosion in Libya that led to the loss of about 90,000 barrels of crude. But prices are still low compared with the $100 a barrel cost that we saw about 3 years ago, if you remember that.
Well, they do have a personal bond, but the idea of Prince Harry inviting former President Barack Obama to his wedding is sparking some controversy in government circles. We'll tell you about that. Plus, a Utah boy nearly drowns in a frozen pond on Christmas Day. The daring rescue attempt ahead.
I was getting desperate. I had searched the entire broken out area, and he was back underneath the ice beyond the broken out area. And I was actually calling out to him.
Your brain changes as you get older, but Prevagen helps your brain with an ingredient originally discovered in jellyfish.
And he was determined to help, but he was told by 911 dispatchers not to go in. Luckily, rescue workers arrived just in time. Listen.
I couldn't touch the bottom, but I could feel the reeds brushing against my feet. So I knew that I had a real good chance if I just stayed in that search area.
I was surprised when the deputy pulled him out and the paramedic grabbed him. He was just limp. There was nothing there. I figured he was already gone.
Well, the little boy was chasing his dog when he fell through the ice. He was taken to a local hospital. As of last night, his condition has not been released.
Just in, the British government fearing new tensions with the White House after reportedly hearing Prince Harry had perhaps invited former President Obama to his wedding, but did not extend an invitation to President Trump. The Prince and the Obamas bonded at the Invictus Games in Canada. When asked about the possible invitation during an interview he did with President Obama, Prince Harry dodged the question, saying he didn't know. So let's talk about all of this with Niall Gardner, director of the Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom at the Heritage Foundation. Would it be a huge breach of diplomatic protocol in Britain for the Prince to invite the former president to his wedding, but not the sitting president?
I think it would be very unusual, and certainly there are a number of reports in London indicating that government advisors have strongly suggested to the royal family that an invitation not be extended to Barack Obama. My sense is that I think the royal family will want to avoid any sort of political controversy over the royal wedding, which takes place on May 19th at Windsor Castle. And I would very much doubt, actually, that Barack Obama would in fact be invited. But there is a lot of speculation at the moment in the United Kingdom. And without a doubt, I think this is a sort of hot-button political issue at the moment with the potential for significant controversy.
Let me play just a little bit of an interview. This is kind of an unusual interview that the BBC did, because the interviewer is Prince Harry and his guest is Barack Obama. I want to play this for you.
You've sat through the inauguration with your game face on, not giving much emotion away, as we all saw. What's going through your mind?
The sense that there was a completion and that we had done the work in a way that preserved our integrity and left us whole, and that we hadn't fundamentally changed, I think was a satisfying feeling. Now, that was mixed with all the work that was still undone.
So he's telling the former president there that he had his game face on at the inauguration. Ultimately, this is kind of all up to the Queen, is it not? I mean, it may be Harry's wedding, but she's kind of the one who rules yes or no on the guest list.
Well, certainly the Queen has a big say in this. Ultimately, I think that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle will be the deciders in terms of the final invitation list. But the British government, although it has a consultative role, does also have a strong say in this matter as well. And I think the British government will be very concerned about any political fallout from an invitation being extended to Barack Obama, but not to President Trump. It's also important to bear in mind, actually, that Barack Obama himself is a very controversial figure in the United Kingdom, not least because of his warnings against Brexit in advance of the UK referendum. He also warned the British people they would be at the back of the queue if they voted for Brexit. And so Barack Obama is known as a very anti-Brexit figure. And I think that is also going to loom large, actually, with regard to this overall debate. He also had a track record as US president of not exactly being the strongest friend for Great Britain. In fact, his administration sided with Argentina over the Falklands question, a very sensitive issue for the British people. And so President Obama's own track record when it comes to Great Britain isn't exactly particularly stellar.
But Theresa May, the sitting prime minister, she's had her own issues, I guess you would say, with President Trump.
Certainly, there have been, some disagreements between Theresa May and President Trump. But overall, I would say the special relationship is actually very, very strong. You do have a US administration at this time that is very pro-British, very pro-Brexit. And I think that overall, the relationship between Washington and London is very, very powerful at this time. And certainly the British government, I think, will be very keen to ensure that the US-UK special relationship continues to be extremely strong in the coming years. So certainly this is going to be a very interesting debate that's going to take place in the UK in the coming months. But my sense is that Barack Obama probably won't be going over to the royal wedding.
Niall Gardner from the Heritage Foundation. Niall, good to have you on. Thanks.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
2017 was quite a year, huh? Filled with scandals in Hollywood and Washington, D.C., with a number of celebrities and politicians hit with sexual harassment allegations. Ainsley Earhart takes a look back.
La La Land.
An epic blunder at the Oscars when La La Land eclipsed Moonlight as Best Picture. But moments later...
I'm sorry. No, there's a mistake. Moonlight, you guys won Best Picture.
The mix-up was corrected in the middle of La La Land's acceptance speech, with the cast and crew of Moonlight going on to accept the award. Kathy Griffin creating a bloody mess after a photo shoot of her surfaced with her holding a mask of President Trump's bloody head. The comedian initially said that she was sorry, but then later revoked that apology. United Airlines faced a public relations nightmare in April. Video shows 2 security officers violently dragging a passenger off the plane when the passenger refused to give up his seat to an airline crew member. The CEO of the company, Oscar Munoz, issued a public apology for the incident. You might want to call him Pill Cosby. The legendary actor is accused of drugging Andrea Constand before he performed sexual acts in 2004. Cosby denies the charges, and a judge declared a mistrial after jurors failed to reach a verdict. The new trial is set to begin in the spring. Dove also coming under fire for what some called a racially insensitive commercial. The ad featured a black woman removing her shirt to reveal a white woman. The soap company saying it missed the mark in thoughtfully representing women of color. Dozens of women come forward accusing director Harvey Weinstein of harassment, assault, and even rape. The movie mogul was dismissed from the Weinstein Company and expelled from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, in addition to several open investigations by authorities. Weinstein denies the allegations. The Weinstein story creating a ripple effect, with dozens of men accused, including Kevin Spacey, Louis C.K., Jeffrey Tambor, Ben Affleck, Dustin Hoffman, Nick Carter, Sylvester Stallone, and former President George H.W. Bush.
As I'm sure you can imagine, we are devastated.
Today's show anchor Matt Lauer terminated from NBC after an employee filed a complaint about inappropriate sexual behavior in the workplace. NBC News chairman Andrew Lack said it was the first complaint lodged against Lauer, but the network has reason to believe it was not an isolated incident. Journalist Charlie Rose was fired from CBS, and his prominent interview show was dropped by Bloomberg and PBS after several women accused the former CBS This Morning host of harassment, including groping and lewd phone calls. Harassment allegations shaking up Washington as well. Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore accused of dating and in some instances sexually assaulting teenage girls when he was in his 30s. He denies all of the allegations.
The people of Alabama had more in common than to divide us.
Moore ended up losing the seat in the December 12th election against Democrat Doug Jones. Democratic Senator Al Franken, shown in this photo, placing his hands over Leanne Tweeden in 2006. Several other women accused the senator of touching them inappropriately at campaign events. After mounting pressure, the senator resigned. This just days after Democrat John Conyers, facing his own allegations, announced his retirement. With 2018 right around the corner, no doubt there will be more of these scandals in the news, and we'll be covering it all for you right here. In New York, Ainsley Earhart, Fox News.
Well, President Trump on the attack against what he calls a tainted FBI, while Democrats fire back, calling his behavior a threat to democracy. Our panel weighs in on the debate.
Of the Clinton email investigation. The president tweeting yesterday, wow, at Fox Friends. Dossier is bogus. Clinton campaign DNC funded dossier. FBI cannot, after all of this time, verify claims in the dossier of Russia-Trump collusion. FBI tainted. And they use this crooked Hillary pile of garbage as the basis for going after the Trump campaign. While some critics say the president's tactics are having the opposite of the intended effects. So here's investigative reporter Carl Bernstein.
There's only one institution that really has been tainted through these months, and that is the Trump presidency. It's lies by his disrespect for American institutions operating under the law with traditional American democracy and the instruments thereof.
So let's bring in our panel. Former Obama campaign regional field director and Democratic strategist Robin Biro, and Jason Johnson, former chief strategist for the Ted Cruz campaign. Nice to see you both.
Thank you. Good to see you.
All right, so Jason, I want to start with you. What do you make of Carl Bernstein's comments?
Well, I mean, in many ways, 2017 is ending the same way it began. Those who are critics of the president still are critics. And anytime someone criticizes the president, he drops a Twitter bomb, if you will, on them. I mean, Carl Bernstein deserves a lot of respect. I mean, his contributions clearly to the resignation of President Nixon, without dispute. But let's be real. He turned in his reporter hat long ago and exchanged it for an advocacy badge, if you will. Having said that, there's no question that from time to time these tweets, there are many people, both Republicans, independents across the board, who would rather not see them. But in the president's defense, he is controlling the message. It is up for debate whether or not it's helpful to his cause. But as always, he's on offense and he's defining the narrative, even here between Christmas and New Year.
Yeah, certainly controlling the message. You know, Robin, some of these tweets are directed at that dossier, and the dossier contains some pretty nasty allegations that have not been proven. So you're a former Army Ranger. I mean, is the president lobbing grenades when he's basically taking incoming fire? Isn't that fair?
That is fair, Leah, and to a point. But the FBI, they are civil servants, and you mentioned that I was a former Ranger. So yes, these people took the same oath that I did to defend and protect the U.S. Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. They have a responsibility to leave no stone unturned and make sure that there was no collusion. They're just doing their jobs. So I think that the attacks from the president are somewhat unfair, and especially I want to call him out for one thing, the term whataboutism. Anytime the president is criticized, you got that. What about Hillary's emails to try and deflect attention? And I think Americans are seeing through that to a point, Leah.
Well, I think you got to say, well, what about the things that haven't been proven in the dossier, don't you?
Yes, I completely agree.
Fair enough.
And there were some things that were true, but a lot of things. I mean, that's why Hillary Clinton didn't use any of it in her campaign when she got it, because it looked bogus, and neither did the Republican who paid for initially.
Well, it's got to be pretty tough having that sitting around online with some of those allegations. So I want to talk about the credibility of the FBI, because you brought that up and you make such a good point. The FBI does such an important job to protect us against terrorism, against counterintelligence. To take care of our criminal system. Richard Painter, who's a top ethics lawyer, was one for Bush 43, tweeted about what Director Wray needs to do right now. This is what he said. He said, FBI Director Chris Wray is allowing himself and the FBI to be humiliated by Trump and by political hacks in Congress. Wray needs to do his job and tell all of them to cut it out. If Wray can't do that, he should resign. Jason, what do you think about this?
Well, I mean, I think anyone who's a consumer of news regularly understands where Mr. Painter stands. But look, if we step back away from this, just as the presidency itself is larger than any one president, the same is true for the Department of Justice and for the FBI. It's much larger than any one director, and it's certainly much larger than any individual investigation. To be clear, there have been some very troubling details that we've learned about, the text, et cetera. But at the same time, as we know, the special counsel has let go that one individual. So I believe that the Department of Justice, the FBI, will certainly survive this and will move on in the end. And the most important thing is when the investigation is concluded, all of the facts are laid on the table, and the American people will be able to make a sound judgment.
And I think that's so important. Robin, I just want to give you a quick last word on your thoughts as far as how Director Wray should handle this criticism.
That's a tough one. I think that they just need to do their jobs. Director Wray, I think, is doing a fine job. I want to point out that Bob Mueller himself is a Republican who was appointed by a Republican. And I see him vilified so much in the Donald Trump blogs. And I just don't like these attacks on the FBI. I think that they're unfair.
All right. Well, thank you both. Merry Christmas.
Well, LAX to LAX in a quick 8 hours. A flight forced to return to the Los Angeles airport after 4 hours in the air. Why that plane had to turn around? Next.
Chaos everywhere. Terminals were full. I think I waited 40 minutes almost for my bag by now, so it's been pretty crazy, but I guess that's expected the day after Christmas.
It's here. The Publishers Clearinghouse 5.
Forward, will we see some bipartisanship in this next legislative effort, or will Democrats fight it tooth and nail with the midterms in sight? We're going to debate that.
And some editors from a liberal magazine unloading on Hillary Clinton. They're scathing New Year's resolutions for her and whether her own base is really, finally, totally over her. And if so, where do they turn now?
So over you, Hillary. All that plus.
Over it.
Our hashtag one lucky guy outnumbered coming up at the top of the hour.
See you soon.
Get this. Passengers seriously frustrated after flying 4 hours of an 11-hour flight before the plane turns around, all because a passenger mistakenly got on the wrong flight. Well, the now famous flight to nowhere took off from LAX for Tokyo, but never landed there. William Lajeunesse live from LA to explain. William?
Well, John, on board that plane, unfortunately for ANA, was a supermodel, and they can be super bad when they have 9 million followers and things go wrong. Chrissy Teigen is frankly probably half the reason people are talking about this. So here's what happened. All Nippon Air Flight 175 departs LA yesterday for Tokyo. A few hours in, somehow ANA is not saying how or who told them. They find out there's this unauthorized person on board. The pilot decides to return to LAX. Unfortunately for ANA, in first class was Chrissy Teigen, 9 million followers, and they hear this. Why did we all get punished for this one person's mistake? Why not just land in Tokyo and send the other person back? How is this the better idea, you ask? We all had the same question.
Thank you so much for taking me on this awesome vacation, babe.
Welcome to Los Angeles.
So what happened? Well, according to an LAX security alert, there was an administrative mix-up, which was resolved, but the crew opted to return. So the scanner, when you check in, that's supposed to be programmed to screen passengers for every flight, and it tells the gate agent with a red light and a buzzer, not a beep, not to board the passenger. That didn't happen. Don't know why. Here could be the problem. That unauthorized passenger had a United ticket. Both ANA and United are part of Star Alliance. The ANA Flight 175 and United 7925 are technically the same flight, same plane, code share. Also, there's a United flight departing out of LAX for Tokyo at the exact same time. So it's possible the passenger was confused and the computer didn't catch the error, or the gate agent let him on and failed to make the change, John. We don't know. You're a pilot. This is not supposed to happen. As you know, this is not a small error. That flight scanner is tied into U.S. and Japanese security computers, so bad people don't get on planes. So this is a super screw-up.
I'm with Chrissy on this one. No tickets on my plane. William Lajeunesse, thank you. Be right back.
My daughter is studying to be a dentist, and she gave me advice. She said, Dad, go pro with Crest Pro Health.